Oh, hit the mute button. Hello, welcome. Let's see if we're doing this. What month is it? November. Hey everyone, how's it going? So welcome to the November edition of the Baton Rouge.net user group. So special tonight for those of you who are just joining us or have joined us before. We are experimenting with streaming to both YouTube and Twitch. And also my internet is really bad right now. So hopefully I'm not too distorted coming through, but it's a me thing. Our speaker will be fine. Trust, at least I hope he will be, but I'm sure he will be. So anyway, welcome. Yeah, my name is Brian McCoy. I help run the Baton Rouge.net user group. Since COVID, we went virtual. With me tonight, I have Jeremy Knight and Jeremy Cronan. Jeremy Knight runs the Home of Thibodeau side, and Jeremy Cronan has been with us helping with the Baton Rouge user group for as long as I can remember. He is also going to be our speaker tonight, so big shout out to Jeremy for come and speak to us. So let's see if I can see chat. See if anybody's out there. See how y'all are doing. I should be able to see chat from both the YouTube and the Twitch side, but if you're watching on one of the platforms, you probably won't be able to see us on the other, but feel free to join us on whichever one you feel comfortable on. So just trying to make our stream a little bit more accessible and discoverable, and then I guess one less button that we have to click to export things. So let's see, what else do we have? As usual, please join our Discord channel. We have commands in the chat if you're curious. That'll pop up links. We are pretty active in there. We'll let you know what's going on with the user group, and when we have our different meetings scheduled. So we'll also ask suggestions from the community, because we always like to hear from you all about how we can make things better. Speaking of making things better, also .NET Conf is going on right now. So I hope y'all are paying attention to that. I believe we were actually hosting it before here. So be sure to check out .NET Conf. If you see anything that you like or that you're interested in the conference, feel free to hop in Discord, send me a message, or just post something. Let us know what speaker it is, and I'll see what we can do about getting them on our stream, and we can have a little bit more of a one-to-one conversation with them. So let's see what else we got. Twitter. I've been not active at all in that, but that's okay. Follow us for updates of meetings and speakers. Let's see who else. Of course, our YouTube channel. We export all of our talks to our YouTube channel. So if you missed anything, feel free to go there and watch it. We have some great talks out there. Some are getting a lot of airplay, so it's really nice. Feel free to use that. If you'd like to be a speaker, if you want to come on and kind of flex your public speaking skills and have your stream debut, we'll be happy to have you on here. And I say we have everything. All you have to do is join the meeting and talk. It's super easy. We make it easy on you. I'm going through my stuff. We'll say we also have a Facebook account. I believe we have commands for that as well. See anything else? I think that's about it. So without further ado, I can bring Jeremy on. Like I said, be sure to look out for .NET Conf going on right now. Oh, one other thing, I guess this will be the last user group meeting of the year. So we're going to take December off, but we'll be back in January, and we're going to start trying to schedule speakers out for next year. So like I said, if you have anything that you're interested in, or if you know anybody who may have the potential to come on and speak, feel free to let us know. If not, I will just cold call any and everybody that I can get a contact information for until I find people to come on and talk for us. So come on, Mr. Cronan. You want to add yourself? Or
Hello.
All right. So what are you going to be talking about tonight?
We are going to be talking about DevOps, or one small portion of DevOps inside of one part of DevOps inside the whole environment. So mainly CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. And like you said, I've been with the Baton Rouge user group for, good Lord, I don't know how many years now. I've actually been in IT for almost 20 years, I believe 17 or so. And yeah, I've been with the .NET user group since it was at Lamar Advertising. So
Oh, nice. And I just got word that our YouTube chat commands don't work. So I apologize for that, but I mean, it'll be fine. We'll get that set up. This is the first time we've used this software to broadcast to YouTube. So we're mostly just trying it out to see if it actually works. But yeah, I'll go ahead and take myself off screen and let you go.
All righty, sounds good. All righty. Like I said, my name is Jeremy Cronan. I'm actually an application developer and DevOps engineer for the Alliance Safety Council in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So just guess we can go straight into it. Like I said, I've been part of the Alliance for 10 years now, and we just started actual DevOps fully with me as the DevOps engineer about a year now. So I started out in Azure Pipelines, and we're actually moving into GitHub now, just because we are moving into the AWS environment. And we were running two separate CI/CD software, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. To start off simply, what is DevOps? DevOps is the combination of all areas of the software pipeline. It controls it. It oversees development, QA, operations, meaning the actual setup of the servers and stuff like that, and it goes through the entire software lifetime. So basically, DevOps, you go with the planning, go through the coding, through the building, the testing, the packaging, releasing, operating, includes monitoring. So it's entire life cycle of the software. DevOps tries to incorporate all of it, the development and the actual operations. So as you can see, it's got the networking, the planning, everything. So we are only going to touch about one area, which is just the building, the testing, sort of this bottom half of the circle, the build, test, package, and release. What this allows is we'll see where it all comes into. So what we're going to work into is the CI/CD portion, which is continuous integration, and the CD part, which is the continuous delivery or deployment. So pretty simply, continuous integration is merging all the code of the developers into one area, and then it automatically creates build artifacts based on that. You have automatic compiling, automatic user testing. So if you have a repository that everybody's merging into, which hopefully you do, you've already started the start process of integration, continuous integration. What this does is you have continuous integration then does is it takes that code. So every time a developer syncs to a certain branch, you can take that code, automatically compile it, and if it breaks, then it'll send an error message to that user, says broken. It can run automatic user testing, and we all know user testing is big, and hopefully it's being used even. And then also at the end of that testing and compiling, you can have a build artifact that then it moves into continuous development. So once CI is done, you go into continuous development, which basically takes that build artifact and automatically deploys it to any server that you want. So you can have a dev environment set up, a QA environment. You can have multiple environments set up and a process using continuous delivery and deployment that takes those build artifacts at certain times that you want, or certain branches that you want. So you can have a dev branch, you can have a QA branch, then you have your production branch, and while the code moves from one branch to the other, it automatically hits off the continuous integration, creating the build artifacts, and then the continuous deployment after that build artifact's made to whatever environment you have, like your servers for dev, your servers for QA, and such like that. So the developers don't have to do a manual build. We used to have it where every time we need to push to dev or QA or something like that, we would have a programmer who would have to stop what they're doing, create a build, push it to the server, manually copying. With DevOps, it's all automated now. And this allows also in our company, we license our server to other safety councils. So we host their server on their software servers on our own server. So we can now integrate them into the deployment process. So once it's pushed to production, we can then take that production build artifact and deploy it to any and all of our customers after a certain time. So we can say, wait 2 weeks, make sure it's on production, no problem. And then after that's done, we can push it to our customers at that time, which makes it a lot quicker, a lot more smoother. We've gone from where we've had to update customers taking 2 weeks just to look at the code and look at their databases and stuff like that. And we're trying to push it down to at least 8 hours, because not only can you do software code, but you can do SQL code as well. If you use SQL data tools, a SQL data tool project, you can create a CI/CD pipeline for the database updates as well for that. So we're working into that. There's many different tools available for CI/CD. This is just some of the big ones that you see on the screen. Azure Pipelines, GitHub Actions are the two we're talking about today. Circle CI is the other software that our team has been using. But we were using Azure Pipelines and Circle CI. But since we've already had a lot of repos in GitHub, we looked at GitHub Actions, and it's actually, there's some good and bad for all of these. GitLab is another good one. Jenkins is a good one. I think Jenkins is the only one that I've seen that may not have a cloud solution, or if it is, it's money wise. All the other ones definitely have a cloud solution to run all the processes, or you can run it on your local machines. So I'll just show those off later. So what we have is, we'll go right into Azure Pipelines. Essentially, Azure Pipelines is just built into the Azure development area. So you have Azure Repos, you have Azure Pipelines, you have Azure Testing. I can go ahead and show that off here. So you have inside of Azure DevOps is what it's called. You have a board you can keep track of all your stuff, an issue board. You have your repo, you have your pipelines, you have test plans. You can store your artifacts here. So the areas we're going to focus on with CI/CD is, of course, you have your repo with your different branches. And inside of these branches, you can actually require them. So what I always recommend is, for the branches, if you go into repositories on the side, and then inside here, you can actually, under policies, I always like to lock the main branch, which require a reviewer. What this does is it locks the branch from being checked in. So the only way to check into this branch is to create a pull request. And that way you can check into the development code all you want. It pushes out to development, your dev sites, wherever you want. And then once you're ready, normally I would have a branch for QA, and then a branch for the production, which would be main. It just pushes along that line. You may be wondering, why aren't there branches for each of the production pushes? That's because pipelines is where the CI/CD is being done. So you can see I have two CI/CD pipelines here, one for development and one for main branch. And inside of each of these pushes, it creates what's called an artifact. So inside the artifact, here we go. This one's got artifacts. Inside the artifact, it actually stores the data here. So if you ever need to download it and say go back to a previous run, you can always come in here and rerun the production to push it back into it, or you can just download the artifact and push it yourself. This allows for storage here, so you're not running out with like 20,000 branches inside your system for every time you release a software. You just have your nice normal branches. The developers can branch off of development all they want, do whatever code they want to do in testing inside of there. And then when they're done with that, they would just merge back into the development branch. And it would then push off to the dev server. So when they branch off of the development branch and running what they want to run, they won't ever push into the CI/CD will never run for the pipelines unless you want it. And I'll show you the code on how to do this later. But the CI/CD won't run unless you specify which branches for it to run. So like I said, in the repos, for the Azure pipelines, you can pull from any repo options that you want. Azure repos, Bitbucket, GitHub, Subversion, anything that's a Git repository can be used to run the CI/CD process inside of Azure pipelines. In the format, every format is YAML. The problem is every software has its own version of YAML inside of it. So it's always good to find one that you like and one that you can use. So you see here, it starts with the pipeline. You have their separate stages, which can be build and push out. Then you have all the jobs that run inside of that, and all the jobs have a certain step. Again, I'll show some demo, and the demo code will be available for download on my GitHub. Next, we'll go into GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions is actually built into GitHub. So if you run GitHub right now, you have the availability for actions. I will say for Azure and GitHub, there are free minutes, because every time you're using one of their servers to run the code, to compile the code, you're using up minutes. So there are free minutes per month, and then it'll start costing money from that. So I can show that. It's if you look at each individual one, you'll see it. And it depends what kind of plan you have with GitHub or with Azure. Each level will give you free minutes, and then after you use up those minutes, it'll start charging, or just stop processing if you tell it not to charge you. So in repo options for GitHub Actions, the main repository that it pulls from is always the GitHub repository. It's GitHub's process, but you do have the option of adding more repositories of any kind of Git. So I have a couple of repositories that are pulling from two separate. I have a couple of actions or pipelines that actually pull from a couple of repositories. So every time code gets checked in, it's pulling from two repositories at the same time, and I can actually tell it which branch to pull from. So when it's running the dev build, it always pulls from the dev branch of both repositories. Again, it uses YAML, but as you can see, compared to Azure, it's a totally separate format. So you have jobs at the top, and then each of the stages, the build, everything is totally separate. So we'll do a quick side by side. So just wanted to give a little quick rundown of that. And now show off GitHub Actions. So you come to any GitHub repository, and there's this Actions tab at the top. So you'll see all the different pipelines available for it. And then inside of settings, like I told in there, you can always protect branch protection, which again requires you to actually come in and actually do a pull request before merging. Again, I can't recommend this often. this is the best thing to do for your production branch, because this way it keeps your stuff from ever getting just someone just going in and checking into your master branch. So development branch, if you ever want to keep that open, you can keep that open, but I always recommend your development your production to always be locked down, and your QA sometimes too, if you want to. That way it has to be from dev before it can go into any of the other ones, or you have to actually approve it. So what I've done is I've built one project. So what you see here, this link here, I'll post it in the chat. This is where the code will be stored. Right now, you see two areas inside of here. So you see the BirdNug test. This is the GitHub version, and then BirdNug test Azure is what's currently inside of my Azure repo right here. But the actual pipeline workflow for GitHub, it always has to be inside of .github/workflows. Inside that folder, it will find any YAML that's inside of there and throw it up as a pipeline here. Inside of Azure Pipelines, you can actually specify where exactly. Go back. You can actually, when you're creating the pipeline, again, you can see any and all areas that you can get it from. But I can choose here, and I can say choose an existing pipeline, and you can choose anywhere inside the system. It'll look for any YAML inside the repo, and you can choose it from here. So your YAML doesn't have to be in a certain folder. It could be anywhere. So my Azure, inside this repo, the Azure pipelines are inside the Azure folder, but they can be inside a folder called build. They can be on the top level, like it is inside my Azure repo right here. They're actually in the top level. Another thing that both systems do for YAML is you can use any software you want. You don't have to use Visual Studio. You don't have to use Visual Studio Code. But I personally use Visual Studio Code because it has extensions that allow for formatting. So inside of Visual Studio Code, in my extensions, there's actually a YAML language support by Red Hat, as well as GitHub has their own language support, and Azure Pipelines has their own language support. So you can choose whichever programming you're using for GitHub. I mean, for your repository and your YAML, and it will actually show your go away. It will actually help you format it. With YAML, it's very simple. It's basically 2 spaces to indent. So every indent is 2 spaces. Everything has to start with this dash. So every new section has to start with the dash, just to symbolize it's a new area. But I can show you here. Let me just bring up these two and split right. So what we have here is we have the 2 separate areas. So on the left is GitHub, and on the right is Azure, as you can. So as I said, it has the GitHub has to be inside the .github workflows folder. Azure can be inside of anything, and right off the bat, you can see big differences inside the 2. So like I said, each company has their own syntax to use. So inside of Azure, it uses steps and tasks, while inside of GitHub, you have steps and uses, which basically are just all the actions that are used. Before I forget, one thing that you can do, you don't even have to have software installed on your computer. You don't even have to download the repo to look at the workflows or inside of Azure Repo. If you want to just come in and actually edit the items, you can come in here and edit the items inside the workflow, the pipeline itself. Inside of Azure GitHub, it's actually, they have their own workflow area here where you can actually see all the different actions available for you. You can search for actions. So if I was pushing to AWS, I could search for all the AWS stuff. If I was pushing to Azure, like this one is, if I could type correctly, you could see it. And what you would do is just put inside where you need to go. You would put your cursor and you can just easily click in here and just copy and paste the stuff here to what you need to do inside of here. In the side of Azure repos, you can come into the actual pipeline and click edit. And again, it has the same setup as well. You have your code on the left and then all the different options or tasks available inside of Azure GitHub to do between the two. So again, it's just whichever one you feel more comfortable working in. And there is good and bad with both of them, I will admit. I mean, there's good and bad with any and every company. So that's one thing that everybody will say. There's some good and there's some bad everywhere's. What I found with Azure is Azure is great for, I mean, yeah, Azure Pipelines, it works great with Azure. It actually will work with AWS as well. If you install AWS you can search inside here and you notice that there's no AWS stuff, but AWS does have their own pipeline tasks available that you can install into Azure, and it will add the code templates over here on the right side for AWS. But as well as one thing that I do like with Azure that GitHub doesn't have yet is something called templates, which I'll show off later. It's a big, it's basically allows you to centralize coding in sort of an object-oriented way instead of just having it all in the YAML file here. GitHub, you do have to have everything inside one YAML file. So if you're doing the same thing multiple times, you're going to have it in multiple different YAML files with the same code inside of it, instead of centralizing it inside of a template file. I haven't heard of any talk about doing that from Azure, but I put in a request for it, and many other people have put in requests. Pardon me. But again, it's just have to wait to see how soon GitHub does this. But what GitHub does is it has built-in stuff for a lot of different areas. So AWS is already built into here. So AWS Actions were created by Amazon. So they know exactly what they're wanting to do, and it's already built into GitHub. So all the big cloud softwares, Azure, AWS, and so forth, are all already inside of GitHub templates. So it's a lot quicker it's a lot already built in instead of having to come in and installing it inside of Azure. Which again is one reason why we moved from Azure to GitHub, is because with our business plan that we have signed up for in GitHub, we get a lot of hours free. So we have yet to hit a build limit for that. And B, we are actually merging we are moving a lot of stuff to AWS Lambdas. So not by my choice, but that's how it came around. But it's coming along nicely. What was I trying to say? Oh yeah, just to point out how CI/CD works. So I can come back to the code. You see on here, this pool on the right side in the Azure. You have a pool select with a VM image. Over on here inside the GitHub, you see runs on. What this allows is you can either have your own personal computer inside your network. So you can install software onto your computer. It'll usually run as a Windows service on a Windows computer or I'm not exactly sure what it runs in a Linux one, but it just runs in the background and runs all the code that you want. So if you have a computer and your network that you haven't Visual Studio installed, you can install the runner. The GitHub term is a runner on that computer, and it will then download the code, compile it, do whatever it needs to do on that machine, which is free for you because you're using your machine. But both of them also actually offer your own versions of their machine. So they have Linux versions, they have a Windows version. So you can see on the Azure side, I'm using a Windows machine. On the GitHub side, it's using a Ubuntu Linux version. They even have Mac versions available if needed, if you're compiling something for a Mac. And then you just tell it what to do. So always the first option is check out the code. In Azure, it automatically checks it out the first time you run it. So just comparing side to side, you have variables at the top. In Azure, it's called variables. In GitHub, it's env. And then each of these are the variable names. So on the side here, so anywhere it's inside the code, you can see variables being used. So if you're referencing it in GitHub, you have the .env and then the name. In Azure on the right side, it's just the variable name surrounded by $sign and open close quotes. And then the actual running of the thing. So as you look in here, on the left side, I actually have it in GitHub separated into two separate stages. You see the build stage and the push to Azure. So it's two separate things that are run. So if I come to actions, yes, leave inside of here, you'll see it runs through the build stage and then pushes to the Azure stage. Inside of Azure, I have it just running inside of one job, though I believe in the main for Azure here, you can see I'm running it. No, that's GitHub master pipeline. Okay, here we go. I have it in two separate stages here. So I had the build and then the deployment in GitHub. So let me just go back over here. So as you can see, each of them has their own separate style. The way to determine what you're going to actually be running on is what you have at the top here. So on tells it when you inside of GitHub how you want it to run. So you can say anytime there's a push to a certain branch, so master here and development here, and then workflow dispatch allows for a manual push. So since I have this workflow dispatch specified, I can come in here, go to my development pipeline and run it from whichever branch I want to do. Inside of Azure, you can it's called triggers, and this basically means the branch right here. But it also allows automatically for pushing from a manual push inside of Azure. So you don't have to have anything extra added to it. It's always inside of CI/CD. You can always have the click the run pipeline button to choose. And then when you do that, you can choose which branch to run. as well as there's options for pull requests. There's options for tags. So anytime instead of a branch, you can go off of a tag. So there's many different options for triggers. You can even run it on a timely schedule. So we have a CI/CD packet that runs every night on Sunday at midnight that takes our production database, scrubs all the data out of it that doesn't need to be in there, shrinks it, and then allows us to replace our dev environments and anytime we want to. So we have that running on a certain time schedule. The time schedule is GMT, so you have to plan it off of GMT time. But after that, it just runs automatically however time you want to. So you come in, you have your variables, you have your start of it, which for GitHub is jobs, for Azure it's stages. You have your different areas. So you have your stages here, which basically is just sections off the code. Inside of GitHub, you tell it where you're running inside each of the different environments. So you can actually have two separate environments. You can have a separate environment for each stage. So in the build, I'm running in Linux, and then on the push to Azure, I'm actually running a Windows machine. And then over here, it's all inside the same pool, but you can have multiple pools inside of here if you need to for Azure. So even out the box, you can come in and create a new template inside the website. And that's all I did. I went to the website, created a new pipeline, and told it I'm building a Microsoft Azure web app. And so it automatically gave me the NuGet command to restore the NuGets, the automatic build, and the automatic testing for all user testing. Inside of GitHub, it just sets up the .NET Core because it has to install .NET Core at that time. Then it does a restore, which is just the NuGet restore, and a build and a test. So all using the .NET code. And if you have any changes you need to do inside of here, you can easily just type it in. Anytime you see run in GitHub, that's just basically running a command line or a bash line for Linux. And well, it's bash for Linux and PowerShell for Windows. So if you have down here if I had inside my Windows environment, if I had a runs here, I could put any PowerShell script I need to inside of here, and it would automatically run the PowerShell. And again, I just have a publish here, and then it pushes the upload artifacts, which then creates the artifact inside the system. As you can see here, I have the same here where it zips up. It does the publish here, zips it up, and then pushes it to the build artifact, which basically allows me to download it if I need to later. And then I have the second stage, which is the pushing to Azure. So you have your, it basically has its own Azure Actions inside of GitHub. And of course, it's Windows, so they have their own task as well. And it saves what it needs to save here. So actually, and it allows for setting up inside the system. So inside of Azure, you have to actually be, you have to set up the connection to your Azure portal inside of Azure DevOps. So you actually have to come in, and there is service connections. I think it's actually inside the bird hook. Yeah. You have to come in here and set up your service connections, which allows you to set up your access to your Azure. So inside the actual code itself, you don't need to store your username, password, and such. That's all stored in the settings for Azure. Inside of Actions, inside the repo is a secrets area that allows you to store your username and passwords here inside a repository. In both areas, once you put it inside of there, you can't get it back. You can update it and change it to something, but if you put it in there and you forget it, sorry. I hate to tell you that, but there is no getting it back once it's inside of here. You can just update it to a new secret, but you can't get it back. One other thing I want to show is environments are a key step inside of CI/CD. This allows you to determine where basically allows you to control what goes where. So inside of Azure, you have your environments inside of here, where you can see what's being deployed, as well as you can actually set up approvals. What this allows is you basically telling this person has to approve the run before it can actually be pushed to whatever you want it to use. Same for inside of environments inside of GitHub. You can come in here and say required viewer has to be this person before. So they actually have to go in and push a button before it'll actually move to the servers. So if I come in here, for each of them, I have it set in main. So if I come in here and run my workflow, I'll just get those started and show off what it does. So, and one thing I do like about environments inside of GitHub is I can come in here and say you have to, the only time that the master environment can be updated is it has to be from the master branch. You can actually specify which branch can go in which environment. So if someone tried to push to the main branch from the dev environment, it would fail automatically and not even start the push. To be able to say which environment it is, it's real simple. It can be in any of the steps that you want. So right here for my main YAML, I have environment main, as well as on the Azure side, I have just the environment main. This allows you to specify that it has to go through this environment. So any steps that are in this environment have to be done before it goes through. So it's always good to set an environment up, even if it's for dev and you're not doing anything for it. It's always good to just keep an environment available to show off, and keep track of everything that you'd want. Let's see. So if I come to the action, so inside of here, inside of GitHub, you see the build is done. It goes through the build, but it's waiting for me to actually come in and actually review for the push to the main branch. And in Azure, it's still running a little bit. But once this is finished, it'll show you real quickly. And that's what I like. You can see the logs. You can easily come in on both of these into each of the separate areas and view any logs. So if something breaks, you'll see right away. You can see all the logs that get put in from it. So as you can see in this one's also waiting for a review. So I can come in here and it should be pushing to here, which right now it just says main. So if I prove it for GitHub, from Azure, it comes in and then it has to wait for a server on their side to pick it up. That's why right now you see job is pending, because it's trying to find a virtual machine on their end to pick it up, which it just did with the hosted agent. And then it will run through and download the artifacts, which was created in the web app, and then it's pushed into Azure right here with the zip file. And once this is done, shouldn't take too long. I say that. Yeah, I did see this. So there is just one little weird thing with just this one versus I haven't debugged any of this or anything. So, but this is pushed from Azure. So now I can come in here, say approve the one for GitHub, and it'll go ahead. And again, it's waiting for its own personal runner to come up. And once this is pushed, it'll update here. So like I said, I don't have to touch anything. I can just come in, push a button, and then it pushes to the server that you want. And you can even have this on your own client machines. There are other software that can do continuous deploy. I believe Mike had mentioned inside of here, you use GitHub Actions with Octopus. Yes, Octopus is just one of those other software that actually does Octopus only does continuous deployment. So you do have to use GitHub Actions to create the actual CI portion, but it does allow for pushing out of Octopus through everything. It's just whichever one that you like the most. So yeah. So now that GitHub's done, I can just come in here, refresh, and it's back to the GitHub version. So as you can see, I don't have to come into my source code and say publish. And so I can come in, I don't have to come into here, right click and go to publish and tell it where to publish. It's going to do this for me every time I push that button. One thing that I did find, what you're seeing here is Visual Studio 2022. Just got released this week, I believe. One thing I did like that GitHub Visual Studio has actually done is I can come here and go to publish, and I can choose where I'm going to be publishing it. But in the next option, blah. Once you choose what you're doing, yes, that you actually have the option to create the CI/CD GitHub Actions directly inside of Visual Studio. So based on your project type, it will create the GitHub Actions inside of Visual Studio itself instead of creating the published file. So that is something new I just saw in 2022, I believe. It may be in 2019, but I just looked and just saw that when I was setting up for this thing. So it actually created one of the environments. So all these environments up here were what were created by that build script. So I didn't even have to set up any of this. I just added the push down here, just separating it into its own separate area, just because I like to have separate stages. I like to have a build stage that builds the artifact and then another stage to push it out. This way you can see if it breaks in the build or if there's any unit tests, which I don't have any unit tests on this project. I just threw together a quick project and threw it up there. So I don't have any logs of that. Sorry, Jeremy. But I can easily have it run the tests. And if it fails before even trying to push it to there. And I can control when it pushes to stage. That's just my personal preference. I like having it separate stages. Allows for the break inside the main one to allow for approvals. Or it could just go straight through, but you can see where it broke. Did it break in the build, or did it break when it was trying to push to the actual server itself? Just to keep the logs separated. That's just my personal preference. One thing I do like that GitHub allows is actual tracking inside of teams. I can actually come inside of teams and actually subscribe to various repositories. So you can subscribe to a bunch of different repositories inside of Teams after you install the GitHub app. And you'll be notified every time a push was done to the repository. and you can actually tell it to tell me every time something a job is run inside of Team. So every time GitHub workflow is run inside of GitHub, it'll tell me that it's running. It'll tell me if it's successful or if it fails. So I can easily click on it and go into the workflow if I was logged into the proper login account, and see where exactly it is. So, but one thing I did want to show with Azure is, before I wrap up, is the difference of the templates, which again is one of the big things I liked about Azure, which I really wish GitHub has. So I can come into, come on. Eventually I can come into my work area, and I can see, I can show inside of here. Again, we had all our repos inside of areas, but what I can come in here, and what you see is this little dash template here, which just calls another YAML file. So inside of here is where all the different tasks are, allowing for centralized areas of coding. So inside my dev, it calls the template. Inside my QA, it calls the template. Inside my master build, it calls that template, and it can pass. Even the variables themselves can be templates inside of Azure. And so you can keep all your different stuff. You can keep all your different stages with their own separate variable files. So all these variables are the exact same name. It's just based off the the variable I call will be on what template variable it uses. So this allows for centralized code, or the ability to keep separate variables based off of dev and QA. Like I said, GitHub doesn't have that. So any code you have for GitHub is going to be inside the YAML file, while in Azure, you can keep it separate inside of template files. That's one of the things I really wish GitHub would do, because that allows for a lot. Because basically, if you see inside my development and main for GitHub, it's the exact same code, just different different variables further down. So the published profile is different. That's the only different in the slot. So if I had I would prefer to have the templates for this. That way I would have all the code centralized. And so if I change it in that one template file, it goes through all the different stages, or all the different stage YAML files, instead of having to change it in one, test it, and then move it and copy the code, change it over to the other one. Is there any questions or anything else? I think that pretty much covers up everything I wanted to discuss. Mike says, have you tried doing mono repo design? Either and only building, deploying from one project that's actually changed? I have not. I've been trying to keep my repos separate, and that just keeping all the different ones, since GitHub doesn't charge you for repos as far as I can tell. I try to keep them all in separate ones, but inside the actual code for the repo, you can tell it what project you're running. So you can tell it inside the working environment, you can tell it which one that you're doing, and there's many different options for triggers and for inside both of them. So you can say you can only look at a certain folder for a trigger. That way you can actually push it for a certain one. So there's many different options for triggers. These are just the baseline triggers that I have here. Is there any other questions? Anything you need to say, Brian?
I'll just hop back in. Oh, I messed you up.
I'm good.
So hey, you're good. No. If you have any questions, how often do you have to use Lambda functions?
For our company, we're actually changing to Lambda functions. You don't have CI/CD doesn't do any Lambda functions at all. It doesn't use Lambda functions. We personally, in our software, are moving to Lambda functions for APIs. Instead of an app service inside of Azure, we're using Lambdas in AWS. So that's the only reason. So what the GitHub and what Azure allows is me to push to the actual Lambda, the actual code. Every time someone checks in code, it pushes to the Lambda, updates the code automatically. So I don't even have to go into AWS and make any change. It can update the Lambda. It can update the layer. It can update what needs to be updated.
Nice. Yeah, it looks like my internet's still garbage. I'm watching myself on the screen over here, and it's like every once in a while I freeze. This is awesome. I don't know what it is about. Awesome. You're welcome, Matt. He actually messaged me. So about the stream. So thanks for coming out. Thanks everybody for coming out. Really appreciate it. So yeah, if we don't have much else, I guess that up for the year. I guess a full year of streaming to Twitch and now YouTube, although we have got zero traction on YouTube tonight. So keep looking at that.
We can advertise it, yeah.
But that's okay. Just providing options for people. So that's what matters.
I do have a question about
Lord,
Azure.
I'm getting out of here.
You do now? All right. I'll ask a question. Does GitHub have anything similar to Azure's release pipelines?
Release pipelines, it was basically a GUI that took what the Lambda did. And so if you look at my code,
I'm not talking about the GUI part. I'm talking about, okay, so you have the difference between a build pipeline, which is what we're talking about now, and a release pipeline, which is actually a deployment pipeline, right? And
well, that's what the CI/CD is. The CD part is the release pipeline. So these releases,
you can do everything in a build pipeline.
Pipelines, yes.
But the reason that in the .NET world, I think in Core came out, which helped with this a lot because you can do a lot of things with environment variables between the different servers. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of ours that run off of the environment variables, and we can actually, like, for example, we only have master. And once we hit master, it does a CI/CD build to our development, but then we have a release pipeline that actually, all that is your deployments between development, QA, UAT, and production. And you can just take that one build and propagate it through approval processes like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that you can do the same thing inside of here, inside the YAML code. Each stage can be its own environment.
Okay.
And each environment can have its own approval process or whatever. So you would see inside the actual each stage, you would see your dev, your staging, your QA, and everything like that, or dev, QA, and you can have a approval process or whatever you want when it's getting pushed across. So you'll be able to see exactly, and you can control when it's pushed to whatever. So I believe you have up to 30 days for GitHub, but it can be changed just by default to push everything all the way through before it'll start canceling them. But yeah, so it's all inside of CI/CD for GitHub, and Azure does the same thing now. You can create a release pipeline, or you can just do everything inside of the actual GitHub, inside the CI area, inside the pipeline. So as you can see for this one, we have where it builds, it deploys to staging, and then we can tell it when to deploy to production and to demo. So it can all work here instead of going into the release area. It's just your preference.
All right, I'm back. Yeah, your fancy background screwing us up. That's good. You're good. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I'm just playing around with buttons now. So there's a new button on here. I want to click it, but you're not sharing your desktop, so I'm not going to do it.
Oh yeah, that's just if I'm doing cinema layout.
So it looks like it'll do the picture in picture. So anyway,
okay,
whatever. We'll continue on. Nobody else can see this, so this isn't good content.
Yeah, I'm just using the OBS. So
yeah. All right, awesome. No, Asbel, we're not answering that question. So Coke equals Pepsi. No, it does not.
Pretty much.
So
if you have no flavor,
yeah,
no taste buds.
So anyway, thanks Jeremy for filling in. For those of you who don't know, which is pretty much all of y'all, that we actually had a different speaker who was supposed to come out, but she had to have something done, so she wasn't able to make it. So Jeremy was polite enough to fill in at the last minute. That's one of the awesome perks of being part of the whole leadership aspect of the user group. Every once in a while, you'll get called up to the show to fill in for content. So I really appreciate that. I haven't had to do it much. Jeremy Knight has done it for us in the past. So, but yeah. Anyway, I guess that's gonna be pretty much it for tonight, unless anybody else has something else they want to say. Going once, going twice. Awesome. Well, again, thanks everybody for coming out, making it the full year. We'll pick back up in January. We're still not doing socials in December yet because of reasons. But anyway, yes, also enjoy .NET Conf. There's been a lot of good information coming out. We're actually going to talk about that in January just to see how things are going, what things people are excited about. So that'll be great. Look for that. And again, I appreciate everybody for coming out.
All right, see y'all later.